Okay, thank you all for coming. So today we're gonna go cook a few simple recipes. We're gonna do a chicken breast with a sauce vierge. We're going for very Mediterranean flavors, so it's very bright, light, and easy to cook. We're gonna start first with the citrus rosemary olive oil cake. All right. So here I have some, this is the flour mixed up with the baking powder, baking soda, and the salt. Okay, all the dry ingredients are here. So I'm just gonna sift this in. So this is a, like a nice little tea cake. You could bake it as a large cake. We're gonna use these little molds, all right? But this is a nice tea cake that goes really well with Earl Grey, I find, because of the orange, and we also put rosemary in it, all right? But this recipe is also very versatile. So if you don't like rosemary, for example, you could leave it out and put in some vanilla as well. Okay, so first we're gonna do the, we need the orange zest, okay? So just about like the quarter of the orange for this recipe. You can actually put more if you want and use the whole thing. It's just, it's not gonna affect the consistency of the cake as much, but it's just gonna make it more fragrant, all right? And what's cool about this recipe is that you can shake up the citrus element. So if you don't like orange, you could use lemon, you could even use lime as well, all right? So we have that, and then here we've got some milk. Okay. And this is olive oil. This is extra virgin olive oil. All right. So the extra virgin olive oil is important because that's going to add a real fragrance to the recipe later. You'll smell it when the cake is baked. All right. If you use regular olive oil, that's fine as well. But the reason we use the extra virgin is it's going to add that real nice fragrance. I mean, this whole recipe kind of tastes of Provence in France, the elements, the orange, the rosemary, the olive oil. It gives you all that in one bite. And then we got the rosemary here. So all you want to do is just chop up the rosemary. Okay, just a rough chop. It doesn't need to be too fine. Okay. And then, oops, we have an orange here. So I'm just going to juice this. Okay. All right, so now we have all that, and then a bit of salt as well. Okay. And now we need a bowl. Okay. So we're just gonna like froth up the egg. I need to move over here because it's not long enough. So you want to get the egg to really froth up. It should like double in volume, and this is going to hold in a lot of the air and add lightness to the cake. All right, it should get that nice pale color. So you can see the egg kind of thickens up, gets really foamy, and then we're going to add our sugar in. And the sugar also has the effect of stabilizing the foam, and that helps to keep the air inside. In the same way, have you guys ever made a meringue? Yeah, when you put egg, sugar into egg whites. So it has a similar effect of stabilizing the egg and capturing that air. Okay, so now we just add our liquid ingredients in. Okay. Give that a mix. Okay, and then I'll dry. Okay, so all you want to do now is just mix it. You don't want to overbeat cake. What happens is if you overwork it, it's going to work out the gluten in the flour. That's what makes cakes tough, all right? The best example is if you're making bread, bread gets worked a lot because they're trying to work out the gluten. So the cake is the opposite, where you want to work it as little as possible, just enough to get all the dry ingredients mixed with the wet ingredients. Okay, and you'll see the mixture is kind of foamy still. And that's because we whipped up the eggs before. You could easily mix this by just throwing everything in and mixing it at the same time, but this method where you foam up the eggs first, that gives you a much lighter texture. Okay, so there you have it. And we just fill up the molds here. And then what I like to do is just garnish it with a bit of rosemary. Just on top. There. Okay, so that goes in the oven probably about 15 minutes or so. Just watch it depending on your oven. Little cake like this will cook pretty fast. You just want to stick a toothpick into the middle of it and pull it out. If it comes out clean, it should be done. Okay? Okay, so that was pretty simple, right? Yeah. And those keep well. Actually, they're better if you eat them the next day. The flavors develop. I like to warm it up because once you warm it up, then the oils relax and you get a lot more fragrance. All right. So let's move on to the cauliflower now. So this is a little salad we're going to pair with the chicken. Okay, so we're just cutting up the cauliflower into florets. So about this big is right. Don't cut it too small because we're going to roast the cauliflower. All right. What happens when you roast the cauliflower is going to shrink a lot because cauliflower has a lot of water in it. All right. So what happens with cauliflower is it looks and tastes kind of bland at first, but when you roast it or you cook it down, it intensifies that flavor and brings out the natural sugars and the flavor in it. So that's what we're doing with the cauliflower here. And we're just going to add a little bit of olive oil here. Okay. And some pepper. Bit of salt. Okay, and then this is just a garam masala mix. Okay, so this can be store-bought, but it adds a great complexity of flavors to the cauliflower. So the cauliflower is like a really good vegetable for taking on other flavors and highlighting spices, especially. All right. So if you wanted this to actually be have a bit of heat, you could add some chili powder to it as well. All right. So you just mix this up, and it doesn't need a lot of oil. We're gonna roast this, and it will just slowly kind of wilt down. If you see the cauliflower starts to char a bit, just give it a stir and flip it over. Okay, in the tray. Okay, so all we do is just put it on a tray like this, all right? And that will shrink down in the oven. Put it in the oven about 180, 200, and you can leave it for about 15, 20 minutes, okay? Here we have the beans, okay? So these are fine beans that we've just steamed, just trim the ends, all right? You can steam them or you can blanch them in a pot of boiling water. If you blanch them in a pot of boiling water, make sure it's heavily salted, and that's going to give like a natural flavor to the fine beans. All right. And whenever you're blanching vegetables, in general, the rule is it should taste like the sea. All right. And that's a good rule of thumb. The exception being when you're boiling potatoes, because potatoes will soak up all the salt. All right? So starchy stuff like this, we actually use, if you've ever over-salted a stock or a sauce, one trick is to throw a potato in it because it will soak up all the salt. So that's why when you're blanching vegetables, don't over-salt the water in for your potatoes. Okay? But these potatoes, we boil in water for about 15 minutes just until they're tender, or you can also steam them as well. All right? So do you guys have like those steamers with the stacks? Yeah, so that's a really easy way to do this dish, is to throw in the beans, throw in the potatoes, and walk away. Because especially for potatoes, it's very hard to overcook them in a steamer. Yeah, so it's quite safe. And what I like to do with the potatoes, once they're cooked, is just crush them. All right, so that splits them. All right. Whether I'm roasting them or using them in a salad like this, because you expose the flesh and then it kind of takes on all the flavors as well. All right, like a sponge. And then we also have some chickpeas here. Okay. And then this is the cauliflower after it's roasted. Okay, so you can see how much it reduces down. All right, and it just takes on all the flavor from the spices. All right. So what we'll do now is just to make a little dressing for the salad. Okay, so this is a basic vinaigrette that I use. It's very versatile, so you don't need to just use it for this salad. If you're doing even a plain garden salad, you can use this as well. One thing that I like about doing this dressing is that it has a little bit of everything to balance the flavors. All right. A lot of times when we eat a salad, if you have where it just tastes of vinegar, that's why people don't like salads, because it's just sour and oily. All right. What you should be looking for is balance of the flavors. All right. So what we do is we put a little bit of mustard in. So that adds some heat, adds some body to the dressing, and then a little bit of honey. So you're getting the sweet, you're getting the sour, you're getting a bit of the heat and earthiness, and then you're getting some fattiness from the olive oil. Okay? So this is really simple. I'll show you. And this, you can just make a big batch of it. And it'll keep for, well, I don't know, I've never lasted that long, but I'm pretty sure it could keep for at least a month, you know, and you always have like a really nice homemade salad dressing at home. Okay, so some vinegar. Right, and olive oil. So I'm using sherry vinegar here, but you could use red wine vinegar, you could use a white wine vinegar, champagne, raspberry, all different kinds of vinegars also work. The principle is still the same. Right? What you want to do is look at maybe the ratios that I've given you in that recipe. Okay, honey just a little bit, just to take the sharpness off the vinegar. But the ratios that I've given you in that recipe work well when you want to play around with the flavors. So if you like a more Japanese profile, you can use rice wine vinegar instead, and then substitute like a little bit of sesame oil into it. And that will give you that kind of, you know, the sesame Japanese dressing? Yeah. And a little bit of honey again. So it just takes the edge off. And if you find that your dressing is too sharp, and it's kind of making your mouth pucker, don't be afraid to add a bit of water in as well and just dilute it. Okay? So here, what you can do is just whisk it up. But what I like to do is, if you guys have a stick blender like this at home, just do that. And the reason I like to do this is because it emulsifies everything, like an aioli or mayonnaise. All right. So then when you're dressing your salad, you get all the flavors evenly spread across your salad. Okay? If you just whisk it and you still have the oil and vinegar and other ingredients and they're all layered separately, You are not going to get that sensation when you eat, all right? Because it'll settle across the salad. So some leaves are going to have oil across it. Some leaves will have vinegar sinking at the bottom, all right? This way you get like a little bit of everything in each bite, and it's consistent. You'll also notice I didn't add any salt into the dressing. That's because if you want to keep this versatile, it always depends on what you're cooking in the salad. Sorry, what you're putting into the salad. So if you've got a lot of anchovies in your salad or olives, all those salty elements, you don't want to have a salty dressing already. You can control it later on, and always try to salt as late as possible in the cooking process at the end. All right? And always taste as you go along. Okay, so now we can assemble the cauliflower. All right, so this is the cauliflower that we roasted already. All right, and then we have the potatoes here, which I said you can just break up. Then we have the beans. Okay, and then we have some chickpeas here. So you can boil chickpeas, or if you're doing this, it's more convenient. You can also use it from a can. It also works. One thing I like to do is actually roast the chickpeas. It's an extra step, but chickpeas, just take a can of chickpeas and you sprinkle some of the garam masala onto your chickpeas, throw it in the oven. Low heat, maybe like 150, 160 degrees, and just stir it a few times, and the outside of the chickpeas will crisp up, and it's almost like this healthy little snack. But it makes a great garnish across everything, like in your salads, or just eat like popcorn as well. Okay, so we have this. Add a scoop of the dressing. And now we add our salt. Some pepper. Go. Just mix it up. In the salad already, it's almost a meal in itself. You have the dressing, which has this kind of sweet acid to it. You have the beans, which are nice and crunchy, and they're really nice and fresh. And the cauliflower adds that spice to it, and then the potatoes kind of just is a place for your palate to rest and brings everything together. Okay? So now just put all this onto the plate. Okay, there we go. Okay, and then you can throw some parsley on top, or if you have other herbs, they mix really well, like fine herbs like chervil, tarragon, dill, all go very well in this. Even mint works really well because it's got almost like a Moroccan kind of flavor profile. Yeah. So there we go. And this you can actually make in advance, and it sits very well, and it tastes better the next day. All right, but it's nicer at room temperature. All right. Okay, so let's get started with the chicken. Okay, so we have our chicken here. The chicken we use Sakura chickens, which I think you can get from NTUC. Yeah. So the reason I like these chickens, they're hormone-free, antibiotic-free. All right. What that means for you is if you get those chickens that are not hormone-free and not antibiotic-free, you can taste the difference always in the breast meat. All right. If you've ever eaten those commercially raised, battery-raised chickens, have you ever had breast meat where it's kind of powdery in the texture? Yeah. So those are chickens that are not happy. So these chickens have grown at like a natural pace, and you can taste it in the muscle fibers. Like the texture of the meat is so nice. The test for me is my grandmother. She's like complete old school Chinese. She will only eat like the dark meat, but when she comes to our restaurant, she'll eat the breast meat. Okay. And it's nothing, I don't tell her, but it's nothing to do with me. It's just the choice of the ingredients that you're using. All right? So here, but this recipe works just as well if you prefer dark meat. Okay? So just some salt, pepper. So this is really easy. Okay. Sheens, can you help me heat up the pan, please? So we're just gonna sear these off, but this recipe is so versatile, you could just as easily throw it onto a grill. You could also even steam the chicken if you're using really good chicken, because what kind of makes or breaks this dish is the sauce vierge that we're gonna make, all right? Sauce vierge translates to virgin sauce in French. It's kind of like a French salsa, all right? And the reason they call it a virgin sauce is because it's meant to be raw. It's all not cooked. But I cook it, okay? I cook it a little bit just to kind of coax the flavors out of the vegetables, all right? So the reason I do that is I guess the average vegetables you get in the supermarket here don't translate as well for a lot of recipes. And that's why sometimes you cook recipes that are well written, but then you find like, oh, this doesn't taste so great. And that's because depending on where the writer of the recipe is from, they may have really great produce, like tomatoes. If you ever get to go to Italy, you know, where they grow the tomatoes in the earth and they got a lot of bright Mediterranean sun, the tomatoes are so sweet, it's like eating sweet fruit, all right? Same thing with the fennel, and the fennel that you get from there has this wonderful, strong anise flavor to it. So that's the reason that I ended up making this, but I roast the tomatoes, I roast the fennel, and that just concentrates the flavors that are already there. And I think that's kind of like the wonderful thing about cooking is that you can figure out ways to use what you have and coax out the flavor from what you have available to you. So the fennel, here just cut off the bottom, trim off the hard stems here. Okay. If you're making stock, like fish stock, these are really great to throw in. Okay. So the fennel, you just want to slice it. Okay. So again, this is something you can do in advance. Do it like a day or even a couple of days before, because the sauce vierge, when you mix it, it's like a salsa. When it sits, the flavors kind of marry and it gets better overnight. All right. So tomatoes, you just want to halve them. So you can halve the tomatoes. You could even just keep them whole, all right? Like that, if it's too much trouble to halve a bunch of tomatoes. You can also use Roma tomatoes, cut them into chunks. But cherry tomatoes, I find, have a bit more sweetness to them and a bit more flavor. And all we're gonna do is just put a bit of salt on, some pepper, then my oil. So some olive oil. So this is non-extra virgin olive oil. Don't waste it on roasting vegetables because extra virgin olive oil is meant to be a finishing oil. You want that fragrance, and if you throw it in the oven, all that fragrance just disappears. All right. So just regular olive oil will work for this. And just give that a quick stir, just to coat it. Okay. And that's all you have to do. Throw it in the oven about 180, 200 degrees, depending on your oven. And then you just want to get them to wilt down. And give them a stir if you see they're starting to burn. Okay? So what's going to happen after that is, oh, I have this onion as well. So the onion we put in raw, okay, just like a salad. Okay. So you can keep this in like semicircles like this, or you can chop them up finely if you prefer. All right. And this is part of the reason why I say it tastes better the next day, because as the onions sit inside the sauce verge, they degorge. So they release their water, the sugars intensify, and then the juice that it forms here takes on this, gets that oniony flavor undercurrent to it. All right. Okay, so this bowl here you see is the fennel and the tomatoes after we put them in the oven. So very little effort. You just need to throw them in the oven basically. Okay. Then, so we're gonna throw everything in here. So these are our fennel, tomatoes. I've got the olives in there as well. Okay. So they don't need to be. We're actually using Tagliascia olives here. You can use Kalamata olives. You can use green olives as well. Up to you. I just like these because they're like small. They got like a lot of nice, really briny flavor. All right. And then I'm going to throw some chives in. You can, again, mix up the chives. Dill, rosemary, all this kind of stuff. Bit of olive oil. And some vinegar. And then again, a little bit of honey. Okay. And then you just mix that up. Okay. And you want, like here, there's all this juice that's come out from the roasting process that will settle at the bottom. So you want to add that in. Maybe more herbs. Okay. And that's basically it. So leave this to sit for at least an hour, and you want all the flavors to macerate, and all the tomato juice is going to go into the onions, the onion juice is going to go into the tomatoes and into the fennel, and you'll have all these very layered tastes to the sauce. Okay. And then all we need to do is really top the chicken off. Okay, so this can be made in advance. If you want to make this a little more fancy for if you're cooking dinner for other people, instead of chicken, this goes well with fish. I've served this with like a nice red snapper. I like it with white fish, but it would just as easily go well with like an oily fish like salmon or mackerel as well, because there's a lot of acid in here, and that will cut through that, and it's very nice, fresh flavors. All right. Okay, so here's some chicken breast that we cooked earlier. So this chicken breast we actually steamed. But it still tastes pretty great. And I don't know if you can you see this? Can you see this? Like the texture of the meat is not, it's not powdery. You know, you can still, when you bite into it, you can get the sensation of the fibers, and that's really nice chicken. I mean, it's soft, it's tender. So just put this here. And then all you want to do is top it with the sauce verge. Okay. A few more chives. And there you go. And that's how you make the chicken breast with the sauce verge. Okay. And then you have this salad. So there's a lot of fiber, a lot of bright colors, a lot of green here. It's going to keep you very, very happy, right? And it's not too heavy at the same time, right? And here are the rosemary cakes for after. Thank you.